Majority milk carton cases didn't come with a happy ending or even a resolution. But Bonnie Loman's picture appeared there too, and it helped break her case wide open for her father who searched for her. Indeed, Loman had disappeared under different circumstances to Pats, Gosh and Bish. That's because when Loman was just 3 years old, her mother and stepfather abducted her from her father. And as previously mentioned, many police departments had been hesitant to pursue such leads in the 1970s. That's because they deemed them to be domestic disputes rather than bona fide kidnapping claims. But Loman's father had another idea. He thought he could use milk cartons to spread awareness about his daughter's disappearance. And although her case differed from the other kidnapping victims pictured on the containers, he somehow managed to get her picture featured on the side too. And 4 years after her disappearance, the cartons with Loman's face made their way to the grocery store where her stepfather took her to buy groceries one day. The young girl then later caught a glimpse of the pictures printed on the containers. And she recognized the picture. It was her. But Loman didn't understand what it meant to have her photo on the side of the milk carton. Instead, she innocently asked her stepfather if she could keep her picture. He said yes, provided she promised not to tell anyone about it or show it to them. But, of course, young children aren't known for their secret-keeping abilities, nor are they great at picking up after themselves. And Loman somehow managed to put the milk carton with her picture in a bag full of toys, and she left it all at a neighbor's house. Subsequently, they picked up the container and instantly realized what had happened to the young girl. With that, the neighbors called the police and positively identified the young girl who lived nearby as Bonnie Loman. Her father finally had answers, and eventually got his daughter back too. Indeed, Loman's tale marks one of the few successes of the milk carton campaign in the 1980s.
In August of 1986, Jeremy Bright went to Myrtle Point, Oregon with his sister, Esty, to attend the Coos County Fair. It had been a yearly affair for the siblings since they had lived in Myrtle Point prior to moving to Grants Pass. Not only were they looking forward to the fair, but they wanted to catch up with friends and family who still lived there. By August 13th, the siblings headed out, stuffing themselves with food, enjoying the rides, and hanging out with friends. At 4:45, Jeremy called his mother to ask her to pick him and his sister up on August 15th. He told her they were having a great time at the fair. Later that night at 9:40, Jeremy visited a local tavern owned by his grandmother. His stepfather, Ollie, frequently hung out there with his buddies. The two caught up. Jeremy borrowed some money from Ollie. But this would be the last time he would ever see Jeremy ever again. The next day, on August 14th, the siblings went to the fair for the second time around 2 p.m. They each had friends to hang out with, so they split up and agreed to meet each other by the Ferris wheel at 5 p.m. Esty showed up, but Jeremy was nowhere to be found. The following day, their mother arrived at Myrtle Point to pick them up. When she got to the apartment, she found Jeremy's wallet, house keys, and new watch. Police were called, and initially they thought Jeremy might have run away. However, after they interviewed friends and family, they realized he wasn't the type to leave, especially without ever telling his sister anything, since they were so close. The Coos County Fair ended, and soon the town was buzzing with rumors on what had happened to the bright boy. One rumor talked of Jeremy attending a party and given a beer laced with a powerful drug, causing him to overdose. Another was about how he got into a scuffle with local teenagers and was severely injured. They tried to nurse him in a cabin, but he died and they buried him instead. Yet another came from the sister of Jeremy's best friend, Cecilia Fish. She told police she and her friends spotted someone wandering the streets covered in blood, but she wasn't sure whether it was Jeremy or not. Another spoke of a man named Terry Steinhoff, who had previously babysat Jeremy and his sister while they were young. It said Jeremy was last seen sitting in the passenger seat of Steinhoff's car. Years later, Steinhoff was actually arrested for stabbing a woman named Patricia Morris. Police believe he may have done the same to Jeremy, but Steinhoff never admitted anything to the police. He later died in prison in 2007, and to this day, Jeremy Bright is still missing.
Eugene Wade Martin, more commonly known as Gene amongst family and friends, was born on the 17th of August 1970 to parents Donald or Donnie Martin and a woman called Janice, whose surname I couldn't actually find online. Eugene grew up in the Des Moines area of Iowa, and shortly after he was born, his parents actually separated, and his father, Donnie, remarried a woman called Sue. Now, Eugene was the youngest in a long line of siblings. He had full brothers called Don and Rick Houghton, and he also had 4 step-siblings through Sue, and they were called Mike, Don, Kimberly, and David Delica. In 1984, 13-year-old Eugene was a very active young teenager. He loved football, fishing, skating, watching TV, and playing video games. He was absolutely doted on by his family, and they absolutely adored him. Probably because he was the youngest and the baby of the family. On Sunday, August 12th, 1984, Eugene woke up at around 5 a.m. to do his paper round, where he delivered the Des Moines Register to locals in the area. Eugene normally delivered the newspapers with his older stepbrother, but on this day he went alone. The Iowa State Fair was actually in town at the time, and Eugene was looking to make some extra pocket money and thought that delivering these newspapers would give him that extra cash he wanted. Witnesses say that they saw Eugene speaking to a white, clean-cut male in his 30s at around 5 to 5:45 a.m. at Southwest 12th Street and Highview Drive. Some witnesses have stated that the two appeared to be in a friendly conversation, and it came across as being quite a father-son conversation. Other witnesses, though, recall seeing Eugene with the same male folding up newspapers and putting them in his bag at around 5:45 to 6:05 a.m. So the witness statements' time frames do differ. Between 6:10 and 6:15 a.m., Eugene's bag was found at the corner of a street outside of the Des Moines area. Inside the bag was still 10 folded newspapers, suggesting that Eugene hadn't finished his round. When customers called to report that they hadn't received their newspapers that morning, the manager went out and delivered the papers himself. Eugene's route manager called the Martin family at approximately 7:15 a.m. where he had told them that Eugene's bag had been abandoned. The manager then called the family back around 15 minutes later at 7:30 a.m. and reported that Eugene still hadn't returned. This obviously caused the Martin family to become concerned. At approximately 8:40 a.m., Jean's father called the police and the search for Eugene began. However, as time progressed, the police found no trace of the young teenager. Unfortunately, Eugene has never been seen since that fateful day.
1979, 15-year-old Martin Allen was traveling home in the London Underground. He had plans to see his older brother, but needed to go home to their cottage on the grounds of the Australian High Commission to get some money. At 3:50 p.m., Martin said goodbye to school friends at the King's Cross station and headed to the Piccadilly line platform to get home from there. Martin never did make it to his destination that day, and even now, nobody knows where he is or what exactly happened to him. As news of Martin's disappearance spread, the investigation grew and a large-scale operation soon followed. Despite being on a train line with several potential witnesses, only one person reported seeing an anxious-looking teen matching Martin's description. He was seen together with a 30-something blonde male who had his arms around the boy. The witness overheard the man telling the teen not to try and run, and the two were last seen leaving Earl's Court Station. This was the only eyewitness testimony reported in Allen's disappearance. An identikit was created describing the boy and the man, but no one has come forward with any additional information. The case was reopened in 2012 with police suspecting Martin's disappearance could be tied to the child abuse scandal at Elm Guest House back in the 1970s and 80s. Elm House was a place known for being the center of a child abuse scandal over a prolonged period of time. Two other missing boys were believed to have been abducted and brought here, so police speculated Martin could have possibly become a victim as well. Suspiciously, reports about the Elm Guest House and the pedophile ring were stopped out of legal threats from the Attorney General. After this, any investigation was kept under wraps and not made public. In 1981, Martin's father proclaimed they believed his son might have been abducted by a gang of child pornographers and taken to another country where he was forced to take part in films. This was an unusual remark to make at the time, since no concrete proof of a pedophile ring had existed, and the Scotland Yard didn't even have a dedicated unit for such crimes yet. Eventually, Elm Guest House was raided. Authorities did find a video suite where pornographic films were made of boys being sexually abused. Despite the supposed investigation, no concrete evidence linking Martin's abduction and the pedophile ring was ever established. Today, the family still has no clue what happened to Martin. His brother Kevin, already a father with 2 kids of his own, says he still thinks often of his brother. He concedes, "I've known for 33 years that Martin wasn't ever going to come back. I just want the people who are responsible to be brought to justice."
The way, Johnny Gosh's face also appeared on the side of milk cartons across the country. In 1982, the 12-year-old headed out to complete his paper route in West Des Moines, Iowa. Soon, his parents' phone started to ring. Gosh's customers hadn't received their newspapers that morning. So, in the early morning hours of September 5, 1982, Gosh's dad, John, did a quick search of their neighborhood. Just 2 blocks from their family home, he found his son's wagon, and it was still full of newspapers. He and his wife, Noreen, called the police right away, but, according to Gosh's mom, they got a cold reception. Indeed, Gosh's mom Noreen claimed that it took around 45 minutes for the police to arrive at their home to take her statement. They also did not immediately classify her son as a missing person. They couldn't without a ransom note, they said. This meant that police waited a full 72 hours to begin looking for him. On top of that, authorities had determined that Johnny had run away. They later decided that he had likely been kidnapped, but they neither found solid evidence to prove it, nor theorized any motives that someone could have in taking the boy. In addition, they never arrested any persons of interest either. Nevertheless, the lack of leads didn't stop the Gosh case from grabbing national attention. Aside from the young boy's appearance on the side of a milk carton in 1984, people learned about the boy's case because of his mother, Noreen. She accused the police's efforts in handling her son's case of being inadequate and spoke up about the issue. Meanwhile, in 1982, Noreen started the Johnny Gosh Foundation, through which she traveled to schools and held seminars to share information about the behaviors of sexual predators. She also lobbied for Iowa state law that would allow police to start probing reports of missing children right away. The Johnny Gosh bill became law in the family's home state in 1984, with 8 other states later following suit. After that, the case came back into focus because of major twists in the story, as reported by Noreen. In 1997, she claimed that her son had shown up on her doorstep late at night with a man she didn't know. He had a birthmark on his chest, just like one that GUY.OH had. But he refused to tell Noreen where he lived because he was in danger, and he then disappeared again. Then, in 2006, Noreen discovered a set of photographs left on her front stoop. In one of the photos, she said she saw her 12-year-old son gagged and with his wrists and ankles tied. Although the authorities later identified 3 of the other children pictured, the boy Noreen believed to be her son was never proven to be anyone else. With so many twists in the case, it's no surprise that GUY.OH's story became a Netflix documentary, Who Took Johnny, in 2014. Meanwhile, 1979, Lower Manhattan in New York City. 6-year-old Aiden Pates was trying to become a man, like many 6-year-olds do. He had met and helped a local handyman just the day before and earned $1 for his work. Aiden also finally convinced his parents that he could walk the 2 blocks to his school bus stop all on his own. Maybe he would even stop at a market next to the bus stop and spend some of his hard-earned dollar buying a Coca-Cola to have with his lunch. Aiden, unfortunately, never made it to the bus stop and never arrived at school. Unfortunately, his teacher did not report it immediately to the principal. No phone call was made to his home or to his parents. This is back in 1979. It's a bit before those types of systems were put into place. This case actually helped spur some of those systems being put into place. His parents would not figure out that he was actually missing until much later in the day, when they saw that he didn't arrive home from school. They called police, and that night over 100 officers
A team of bloodhounds and concerned neighbors were all out looking for Ayton, but they would have no luck finding him. The police initially suspected that the parents might actually be involved, but they quickly confirmed their alibis and shifted their focus. Ayton's father was a professional photographer and had many pictures of Ayton to be used for missing persons posters, and some were even projected on the giant screens in Times Square. Ayton would also be one of the first children to be featured on a missing persons ad on a milk carton. In 1985, a primary suspect would be identified. Jose Antonio Ramos was a convicted child abuser and a friend of Ayton's former babysitter. He was actually the boyfriend of Ayton's nanny. In 1982, he had been accused of attempting to lure boys to a drain pipe close to where he lived. Very large drain pipe that you could actually walk inside of. Police wound up searching that drain pipe area and found photos of Ramos with several young boys. Some of these photos were later found to resemble Ayton. In 1990, Ramos was formally questioned about Ayton. He stated that on the same day that Ayton disappeared, he did indeed take a boy back to his apartment, and he was 90% sure that it was the boy that he kept seeing on TV. He never, however, used Aiton's name. He also said that after he was done with the boy, he had put him on the subway. Apparently the boy wanted to go visit his aunt or something along those lines. He would ultimately later deny that he had anything to do with Aiton's disappearance. However, in 1991, a jailhouse informant said that Ramos told him he knew what happened to Aiton, and he even drew a map of Aiton's bus route, noting correctly that Aiton boarded the bus at the third stop. Despite all of this, Aiton was never found, and he was declared legally dead in 2001, 22 years after he went missing. The Pates family would sue Ramos in 2004 and win a $2 million settlement. They would never see a penny of it, and Ramos would not be criminally prosecuted. Every year, Stan Pates, Aiton's father, would send a copy of the missing persons poster with a simple message written on the back. What did you do to my little boy? Ramos continued to deny his involvement, but kept serving sentences for his many crimes against children. The case was formally reopened in 2010 by the Manhattan DA's office. A few years later, they dug up the basement of a neighboring home to the Pates family. The basement had been the workshop and storage area of the local handyman that had given eaten $1 before he disappeared. However, nothing was found in that search. It was, however, highly publicized, and this would eventually lead to the case getting finally cracked. A man saw the coverage and recalled a conversation he had with his brother-in-law, where his brother-in-law said he had done a bad thing in New York and killed a child. The man called the tip in to police. In 2012, nearly 33 years after the disappearance, Pedro Hernandez was brought in for questioning. He had no prior criminal history and was a husband and father to a teenage daughter. Pedro gave a confession about 8 to the officers. A then 19-year-old Hernandez allegedly lured Aiton to a store with the promise of a soda, choked him in the basement, and then disposed of the body using a plastic bag, placing it in the trash about a block and a half away. Authorities said he seemed somewhat relieved to be confessing. Pedro was never initially questioned about the case, though other employees of that same store were. The current police commissioner has no idea why that is the case. Even Pedro's sister has come forward and also stated that he confessed to killing a boy, and he made this confession in church in the early 80s. There appears to be little motive to this case. Pedro stated himself, "I don't know why I did it. I cannot explain. I tried to stop, but I couldn't stop. Pedro did also talking about an abusive upbringing with an alcoholic father who would beat his mother. It's the only time that Pedro would cry during his taped confession. Authorities charged Pedro with second-degree murder and first-degree kidnapping. However, there is some question if Pedro truly understood his Miranda rights. Pedro's lawyers state that he suffers from a mental disorder which includes delusions and has a very low IQ. A series of hearings were conducted in 2014 to see if his confession would still be admissible. The full trial began in January of 2015, with Pedro now pleading not guilty and the allowed confession being a key piece of evidence presented. It would become a mistrial the following May due to one juror holding out after 18 days of juror deliberations. A retrial began October 19th, 2016, and after another almost 2 weeks of jury deliberations, it was concluded on February 14th, 2017. Pedro was convicted for both murder and kidnapping. The jury foreman told reporters constructive conversations based in logic that were analytical and creative and adaptive, compassionate, and ultimately kind of heartbreaking, guided the panel through what he said were difficult deliberations. Stan and Julie Pates had the 2004 judgment that they had won against Ramos dismissed after the 2015 trial convinced them that Ramos was not responsible for their son's death. May 25th, the anniversary of Aiton's disappearance was declared by President Reagan as Missing Children's Day.